Hi all, this is Kevin Bernatz at Dr. Beer Nuts Development. I'm just going to give a brief overview of Compass's game Oceans of Fire by Rob Beyma. It is a operational level Pacific War game, World War II, and I just want to briefly go over how the game plays and what you can look forward to. So as I mentioned, it is operational level World War II. It's an area control, area movement game, and you basically have your islands going around the Central Pacific, with Japan starting in the usual areas, and starts 41, where Japan is going to have to do their expansion, and then the Allies have to counter, and within 8 turns we'll need to retake sufficient areas that Japan has hopefully taken to get victory. And if they don't take back enough and Japan holds enough victory points, which you can see the sort of purple star right here, that's different areas have different victory points. If Japan holds enough of them at the end of the game, then Japan will win. So just briefly in the areas, you'll have your name, you'll have a control. The starting control is printed on the map. When control changes, then you can place control markers. So each area will have control markers. And what you'll see is on the control marker you have some intrinsic defense strength as well as an anti-air strength. Some have 0, some obviously have more or less. And what's unique is the strengths of both the defense and the intrinsic anti-air will vary from one side to the other. So when the Commonwealth owns New Georgia, it's going to have no intrinsic defense and no anti-air. But when Japan takes control of it, it's quite likely there's going to be an intrinsic defense. I think it's a 2 in New Georgia. There might not still be any anti-air, but maybe it'll be a 2-2 unit instead of a 0-0. So we sort of get rid of a lot of these small scale counters by just building in the factors into the control marker. You also here see different combat units. These are pretty much infantry. There's a few armor units in the game, but essentially at this scale everything is representing infantry. You have U.S. Marines, which are in the dark blue, standard U.S. Shading. If it's a dark shaded unit, you'll see some of these. Those are your elite units, troop quality. So if you look at the 21st Brigade here of Japan, it has a 2 strength with a 2 troop quality. All the elite units will have a 4 troop quality. And then the other number is not movement, but defense factor. So this brigade starts off at 2 attack, 3 defense. As it takes damage, both these values will decrease. So if it's taken 2 damage, it would have an effective attack of 0 and a defense strength of 1. And when it takes the 3rd damage, it would be eliminated. You have some special units like the Japanese SNLF brigades and leaders. You have British units, and then potentially for what-if scenarios, you have some of the Soviet areas also represented by control markers. So let's look at the naval units before we get into just the sequence of play. Similarly, all 3 nations. So you have Japan, you have the Commonwealth or the British, which are the black on brown or tan, and then the white on tan are the Australians, and then you have the Americans. And units, naval units, you have a anti-air, you have an attack, a defense, shore bombardment, a movement, and then a air capacity. So for a carrier, they're going to have an air capacity with no shore bombardment and no surface. For a battleship, for example, you're going to have a fairly high surface value and some shore bombardment, but no carrier, no air capacity. You also have submarines, which include dummy counters for sort of fog of war. Each submarine has a regular unit and a dummy unit. And you'll also notice on here, some counters have a single silhouette and some have a double. A single silhouette essentially represents a single step unit. Now, when this unit takes 10 damage, it would be eliminated. A double silhouetted unit actually has 2 sides. So when it takes the first 10 damage, this unit would be flipped over, and it would be, for a transport, it would essentially be the same. But when this one flips over, it would be represented by a single silhouetted transport, which would have another 10 damage. For some of these battleships and carriers, you'll see two names. So for the Warspite Revenge, when it takes 9 damage, the Warspite would be considered eliminated, and the back would simply have the Revenge with reduced factors across the board. So let's look at the sequence of play. So you have the start of turn, where if there's any reinforcements coming in, players will get them. You also then determine your command points. Command points are basically going to be the heart of the system. And then you conduct a series of rounds. There's going to be 4 rounds with each player getting an impulse in each round. So there's going to be 12 impulses. So for example, let's say the order is Japan, US, Commonwealth. First round, it would be Japan, US, Commonwealth. Second round, Japan, US, Commonwealth, so on and so forth, until all 4 rounds are completed. And the rounds, essentially, you're checking supply, you're doing repairs. The US player can do strategic warfare, which is represented by either bombing Japan with B-29 units, or the submarine campaign, sort of abstracted. And then for each round, sometimes reinforcements will enter at in the middle of the turn as opposed to the beginning of the turn. Then you get to where you're using the units. And so the way you use the units is you have your command points. Each command point effectively gives you 12 activation points. So, for example, Japan often starts with 4 command points on the first turn, on the first round. So they start with, let's say, 16 command points, which we broke down into 4 command points per round. And each command point gives you 12, so they have 48 action points they could spend for that round. Activating a naval unit costs 3, the land division costs 4, a brigade is only 2, and so on and so forth. And so you're using these activation points to activate your units and conduct operations. You can also construct forts or airfields or improve your ports if you have them. As you conduct your operation, the non-phasing players can attempt to intercept. And if they do succeed in intercepting, the phasing player can then counter-intercept to add more units to help out in whatever battle was about to develop. One thing to realize is all naval units stay in port until they're moving an operation or intercepting. So you don't have really naval combat based on movement. Naval combats are always initiated by an interception. So it's a little different than other games. Naval units always end up at ports, and if you want to have a naval battle, it's going to be one side intercepting the movement of another side. And you can do port attacks with carrier air and so on, but that's not the same as an actual naval battle out in the sea area. You then do your end of turn stuff, check and supply again. We'll talk a little bit about combat. So whenever there's a combat in an area, you mark it with a combat concluded marker, and that greatly restricts what other units can move through. It's sort of our way of abstracting how multiple things are happening at the same time. So if there's a big battle going on in one sea area, if you wish to move units through that sea area, you need to commit those before you actually resolve the combat in that sea area. It sounds more complicated than it is. It actually flows rather easily. You have markers that mark if a unit is passing through, or actually if they're performing a mission in the area. And once that area is sort of sealed off after combat, then your mind actually looks at other areas to conduct additional operations. And so it sort of focuses the player into conducting an operation here, operation there, and so on. Not this sort of staggered where you're okay, I move one unit, are you going to intercept? Okay, I move another unit, no. If you're going to do an operation in an area, you're moving everything in there that's going to do an operation in there, and that may move through. The opposing player intercepts, you resolve that, and then life goes on. At the end of every turn, so after the 4 rounds have been done, you then look at has Japan conquered more areas so they get more resources. The more resources they have, the more command points they'll have the next turn. You adjust victory points to see if they've won, and then you resolve some of the effects, either strategic warfare. Players can construct additional forts, airfields, and ports. This is in addition to being able to construct during a turn. So if they need it right away, they can spend action points to do it, or they can wait till the interphase and do it for free. You also get replenishment points or replacement points to help you rebuild units, and you can also do redeployments, strategic movement basically. And finally, you advance a turn marker and begin a new turn. The game is, pull up over here. There's only 8 turns. It basically runs December through the historical September 1945. These indicate when reinforcements for the different sides come in. And play the 8 turns. Certain scenarios only do 1 turn. Some scenarios go maybe 2 or 3 turns, so we have a variety of scenarios. And you're also able to, say, start from the turn 2 scenario and play to the end, or play the 2-turn scenario to a certain stopping point, etc. So hopefully it gives a lot of flexibility on how grand of a game you wish to play, and hopefully this gives a good feel for Oceans of Fire. Thank you.